Hello and welcome back to everyone. We have an exciting discussion on crypto regulation. I was going to say on 3 continents, but it's not. I mean, we have the UK represented, we have the EU, and we have the US. But yeah, I was just trying to be a little bit fun. But I'll now give the word to Halliday, our moderator, and welcome also to Agata, Blair, Joshua, and Nina. The stage is yours.
Thank you, Victoria, and hello, everyone. I'm very glad to be able to be the moderator of this EBC, the State of Crypto Regulation panel. So just shortly to myself, I'm Halliday Siedler. I'm a Germany-based lawyer. I'm quite active in different associations. For example, I'm with INATBA. I'm board of INATBA. I'm also with Think Blocktank, a think tank in Luxembourg. And I'm doing a lot with German and international companies being active in a crypto space. But today it's not about me, today it's about our speakers. And I'm very happy that we have 4 international speakers today, which will give us a good overview, a great overview, I would say, about the regulation and the different jurisdictions in different areas. And for the beginning, I would like to ask each of the speaker to introduce herself, himself, and give us an insight. Is your jurisdiction crypto-friendly and why? And I would like to start with ladies first and go to Josh. So Josh, please, go ahead.
Hi, thanks. It's great to see everyone. I'm Josh Klayman. I'm at Linklaters, which is a global law firm, and I'm U.S. head of FinTech and head of blockchain and digital assets. I'm also senior counsel and one of the global tech sector co-heads. I've been in this space for a while, and I chair the legal working group of the Wall Street Blockchain Alliance. And most recently, I have become on the board of senior advisors of Cypher Accelerator, which is a blockchain and crypto accelerator that Wharton is backing. I've also had the pleasure of getting to know the folks on the panel through think tanks and other things, and I'm really privileged to be with you guys. In terms of whether the U.S. is friendly to crypto, I think it depends on whom you ask, right? I think unlike many other jurisdictions, the idea that digital assets would be completely outside of a regulatory perimeter is a bit of a foreign concept. We have many regulators with many overlapping jurisdictions in many cases and what they may cover. So I think in concept, it's friendly to crypto and innovation. I think sometimes in practice, it may be a little tougher.
Thank you, Josh. I would like to go over to Germany. And in Germany, we have my dear friend and colleague, Nina, located. Nina, can you please go ahead, please introduce yourself and give us a little bit of insight what the German regulator is doing with regards to crypto and if it's friendly or not that friendly.
All right, many thanks, Halliday. Yeah, my name is Nina Ziegler. I'm a partner at DWF, another global law firm, and head our global blockchain competence group there. I'm also involved, and that's where Halliday and I got in touch, and many of the association was founding member of the Bundesblock, the German Blockchain Association. Then we formed together the Think Blocktank, the legal think tank in Luxembourg in 2018, and went on supporting the European Commission in forming INATBA. And Josh and I actually met at the Wharton Crypto at RegTech meetings in Philadelphia. And Agata and I, we share being experts on the European Blockchain Observatory and Forum panel. So I'm also been in this space for quite a while. My personal specialization is in financial regulatory and governance questions. And towards your question whether Germany is actually crypto friendly, I would say it's, as Josh said, it depends who you ask. We gained a lot of clarity in legal topics during the past years, but we also ring-fenced the crypto space quite a bit and moved it all into the regulated financial services area. So I guess the financial service providers out there will have welcomed that, the legal certainty and, that the competition of new startups is quite limited due to the fact that you basically need a license for everything. On the other hand, the crypto startups, the tech community would actually say Germany is quite crypto unfriendly, I guess. Thanks.
Thank you, Nina. So we're gonna get to that later in the discussion, but let us finish with the speakers. Looking over to you, Agata, I mean, you are also a truly international player. I know that you're right now sitting in Portugal, but you're not gonna give us insights on Portugal, but rather on a more global perspective. You're gonna talk a little bit about the EU, but please first start introducing yourself and then tell us, is the EU crypto-friendly or not?
Thank you very much, Alireza, and thank you for having me on this panel. I welcome to see friendly, familiar faces. We have more or less pretty much almost all of us have spoken about the topic frequently in other panels and discussions. I hold the EU flag for today's discussion. And I consider myself an international lawyer, advisor, university assistant professor. I've spent several years practicing finance law in London financial sector, in a leading law firm Clifford Chance and in investment bank Credit Suisse. And currently I focus on legal and regulatory challenges facing blockchain industry. And as Nina has mentioned, I am an expert at the EU Blockchain Observatory and Forum. I am also since recently a chief legal officer for a company called Status, which is a blockchain project. And I'm also in some capacity currently also an assistant professor at the Warsaw University of Technology and a guest professor at a number of other academic institutions in Europe. And I will share Josh and Nina view on whether, it depends whom you ask, whether EU as such is a crypto-friendly jurisdiction or not. However, I must say that at least the EU is trying to achieve something extraordinary by passing a big regulation to cover the crypto space within the EU. Whether that's going to be friendly enough depends on whom you ask exactly. But at least the EU jurisdiction, which is unusual jurisdiction as well, because it covers 27 different jurisdictions, individual jurisdictions, and whether that's going to be friendly, we are about to find out very soon.
Thank you, Agata. Glad having you today on this panel. And now I'm looking over to Blair, who is sitting or located in the UK, a player which has left the EU. Therefore, I would like to give over to you, Blair. Please introduce yourself and tell us, has UK become a crypto-friendly player after leaving the EU?
Well, first off, good afternoon, everybody, and great to be here. And also thank you for inviting someone from the UK onto a European blockchain conference as well. So, friendship all the way around. So, in terms of myself, so Blair Halliday, so I'm the head of UK at Gemini. For those that aren't familiar with Gemini, we're a crypto exchange and custodian. We were founded in the US, but we were launched in the UK in 2020 on the back of receiving licenses from the Financial Conduct Authority, the UK FCA, as an e-money institution. And also as a registered crypto asset firm under the 5th Money Laundering Directive, which is, I guess, the EU's last gift to regulation in the UK. We're actually one of very few firms that have received that approval. I think at the moment there's about 15, and we actually have 2 approvals from them. So, which kind of gives you kind of an idea of how few firms have received that level of approval so far. In terms of kind of my background, I started off definitely not an academic or a lawyer, like the learned people on this panel. I'm previously started off at banking and have worked my way through a variety of payments, FX and e-money firms, and originally got into crypto around 4 years ago with Circle before making the leap to Gemini and leading the line here in the UK. In terms of whether the UK is a crypto-friendly regime, I think I'll definitely kind of echo some of the points that I've made before. I think it depends on what day and what paper you look at. I think there are lots of aspects to it that can give you the impression or the feeling that it is crypto-friendly. I think we have a regime here through the FCA on the Fifth Money Laundering Directive, which means that firms have a degree of registration that they can go through to seek license and approval, which should, in earnest, kind of enable innovation to continue. There are still challenges in this space. We're not overly regulated, which provides kind of opportunity, but also challenges as well. So I think it's still developing. I think the UK's understanding of crypto and how it wants to regulate it is still kind of developing. So it's kind of a bit of a mixed bag at the moment.
Thank you, Blair. Even though you're not a lawyer, you gave a very diplomatic answer to my question. So I will try to get some more insight from you guys to see from your audience perspective if to where they choose to make a move, maybe to your jurisdiction, to if they do the right move. So I have for you 3 questions which I would like to discuss with you. I would touch on how exactly the regulation is working and how this is going to change in 2022. How the NFTs are regulated in your jurisdiction and how DeFi is regulated. We will talk about this for the next 30 minutes. And you guys in the audience, those of you who listen to this, you can write your questions into the chat box and you can put it there. And in the end, we will have roughly 10 minutes to give you answers on your questions. But starting with my first question, so how exactly is the crypto regime in your jurisdiction, and is it going to change within the next 12 months? I'm looking over to the US and to you, Josh. Give us a little bit insight. How is the regulation currently? What are the main facts which are important for someone to understand, and how is this going to change most likely?
Thank you. Well, within the US, we don't just have a single regulatory scheme, right? So we have the SEC, which deals with securities. We have the CFTC that deals with commodities. We have FinCEN that deals with money and payments and, things like that, KYC, AML, all those sorts of questions. We have sanctions. And, we have the IRS dealing with tax. So there is no one unified crypto regulator, unlike certain other jurisdictions. So I think the way things apply is you look at, number one, transactions that are being done. For example, if you're offering and selling digital assets, you look at the actual transaction that's taking place. And could that be a sale of securities, for example? I won't go into the Howey test and all of the other details about the US unless someone asks later about them. But I will say that in general, there tends to be, or there has tended to be, a view from SEC staff that's been espoused that it's very highly likely that if you sold digital assets for fundraising purposes, for example, in an ICO or pursuant to a SAFT, that you're dealing with a security. Now, this, of course, has touch points for anyone who may be marketing this digital asset or touching it or trading it in various different ways. So all of the regulations kind of flow through. We also know from the Telegram case, at least from a letter that was from the CFTC, that in the CFTC's view, virtual assets, they are commodities and they may, on a case-by-case basis, be securities. So you have to think about these sort of things. And of course, there are anti-fraud provisions and things that you might expect. So how this might change in 2022, well, there have been some comments and suggestions that a new regulator be formed. I personally, in my view, and this is not legal advice, not investment advice, not on behalf of my firm or anything like that, but I think it's unlikely that we would have a new regulator come about, certainly not within 2022. However, we have had a recent report on stablecoins by the President's Working Group, for example, where this working group, which had market participants' involvement as well, urged Congress to pass laws. So certainly it's possible that there may be new regulatory schemes that develop as a result of the passage of new laws. Also, the last thing I'll say on this is there is some really meaningful litigation that's working its way through the court, including against the enforcement action that's been brought against, for example, Ripple and certain of its principles. So once we see how these types of cases turn out, I think that will have a large effect on how the regulation develops. Also, since we did have a change of administration recently, presidential administration, things like the OCC, right now there is no appointee, there's no nominee currently to head the OCC, and that could be an incredibly important role for someone to fill. Previously, Brian Brooks had been the head of the OCC and was viewed widely as being crypto-friendly. The acting head of the OCC has likened certain crypto and DeFi to the financial crisis, so has really sounded alarms. So it'll be really interesting to see the way that transpires in the next year. But I think that's enough for me for this.
Thank you, Josh. I will come back to you after we had also Agata, because I will have a follow-up question. But it's interesting to see that you just said it. The administration has changed, stuff have changed. I mean, the US market is always very much practical orientated. When Brian was the former guy from Coinbase, then becoming the OCC head, then I heard that a team of US administration went to Geneva, meeting with the DM guys, bring them back to the US and giving them some promises. So this is all what I heard. Yeah. So we're going to come back maybe to that later. But very interesting to see that the US administration and US policymakers, they're very much practical orientated, but interesting to see what's coming. So much about the US. I would like to hear more from Germany. I mean, the German regulator and the German market, in my opinion, has been a very much front runner, not just in Europe, but also in an international perspective. Looking at Coinbase having its first license as a broker and custody service provider in Germany, not in the US, and others joining. So Nina, what can you tell us about the German regulation and how this is changing? Maybe also a little bit explaining on the German law on electronic securities, which is also very interesting. So what can you tell us, Nina?
Yeah, so Germany, the history of financial regulation of crypto goes back quite far. As early as 2013, BaFin declared that Bitcoin, for example, are financial instruments. So already since then, tokens had been captured by German financial regulation. In 2019, the legislators amended our banking law and included a new definition of crypto assets, which are now also financial instruments. And along with that, the types of tokens which we, according to German law, recognize as financial instruments broadened. So it's not only the cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and Ether anymore, but it's more or less any digital representation of value which might be used as a means of exchange or serve investment purposes. So that's very broad. And you need to keep in mind that the legislator and also the German regulator BaFin now expressly say that everything that can be traded may also serve investment purposes. So that means that basically any tradable token will be captured by that definition, which leaves very little room for any type of crypto token not being under, the encumbrance of the financial regulation. What does that mean? Basically, any type of service constitutes a financial service which requires a license. We are not that. Our understanding of security is not as broad as the US one. So security tokens still need to be comparable to the traditional bonds or shares. So the prospectus regime is not going, as far as in other countries. However, due to the fact that all these tokens are now financial instruments, the servicing side is pretty much limited or restricted. Yeah, and in addition to that, actually since last year, we've got this new law on electronic securities, which you just mentioned, Alireza, which enables now for the first time to issue true securities without having a signed paper handed over to anybody. So in Germany, actually until last year, you always needed to print and sign a paper to create under civil law or from civil law perspective or private law perspective, a security deed. And that paper requirement is now obsolete. But only if you use the new electronic security instrument, which we have available since last summer. And that may also be registered on a blockchain register. So that's the interesting, or for this conference, the interesting part with the electronic security. But unfortunately, that register must be run by a service provider, again, licensed by BaFin, right? So you cannot simply issue a security on Ethereum and manage it yourself. Well, you actually, you can, but then you would, as issuer, also need the appropriate license. And then the last part, the third part, which Germany enacted in autumn, is what we call the crypto transfer regulation that basically implements the travel rule, which FATF requires to be implemented in German law. So that are the three pillars that we have seen so far.
Thank you, Nina. So as what I could hear from you, Germany is very tough on regulation. It's the first player who is doing regulation of crypto assets, which is not negative because we see foreign players coming to the German market, such as Coinbase, and deciding voluntarily to get the license and to be able to provide the services in a regulated manner in Germany. And as we can see, Germany as a front runner or being the first in regulation and a major economic player, not just in the European economic area, but also globally. I would like to look now how the EU reacted to that, or what the EU is doing, as we could see it also in the traditional or conservative securities market, where Germany was always the front runner and providing suggestions on how to regulate things. I would like to hear from Agata if this is true, putting in mind that we had the ESMA and EBA advice papers in January 2019, where they made an analysis of all the jurisdictions within the European Economic Area, and where I believe the result was that only one jurisdiction was regulating or is regulating cryptocurrencies and utility token, and all the others more or less not really. That also the advice of both institutions, ESMA and EBA, was to have EU harmonization when it comes to regulation of crypto assets and to have a single market. So what can you tell us about this, Agata? What is going to change, or what has changed already?
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you, Alireza. You are right indeed. In terms of financial sector, Europe is already harmonized under MiFID and other related financial regulations. But in terms of other areas where crypto assets started to be present, what we are seeing right now in Europe is very fragmented landscape. So we have very proactive, robust jurisdictions like Germany, for example, and we have other jurisdictions which are passive and haven't done much in terms of responding to this innovation. So given that increasing fragmented landscape of regulations that could possibly govern this space, just to give you a little background, over a year ago, in September 2020, the European Commission took a proactive step and adopted what's called the Digital Finance Package. And it's a comprehensive set of measures which is kind of aiming to make Europe fit for the digital age and to build a future digital economy. And it builds also on FinTech Action Plan, European FinTech Action Plan of 2018. And it's an ongoing work of European Commission, European Parliament, and so on. So the package consists of various measures, but the important ones that we should mention here is this proposal for regulatory framework on crypto assets and also a pilot regime. So famous MiCA, which is a proposal for regulation on markets in crypto assets, that will apply to those crypto assets which are at the moment unregulated at the EU level, so outside of the regulatory framework for financial instruments and outside of financial regulation in general. And a pilot regime is a proposal for regulation for market infrastructures based on distributed ledger technology, and it applies to those crypto assets that are already regulated under existing legislation, so it's a little bit more limited in scope. So the MiCA, famous MiCA, is the first EU-level comprehensive legislative proposal for crypto assets. It's a bespoke regulation, quite detailed and growing in size as we keep negotiating it. And that will bring everything that is outside of financial regulation under one umbrella of this regulation. It's a regulation, so it will be directly applicable without any need of transposition, and it will supersede any national regimes applicable to crypto assets not covered by existing EU financial services legislation. So those countries that have already been proactive and designed their own regulatory frameworks for those crypto assets, those frameworks will actually be replaced by harmonized MiCA regulation. It's a very, very comprehensive and detailed regulation, which is hopefully nearing the end of its legislative process. So it might be that the next year will be a big year for Europe, and there will be this brand new, very comprehensive, bespoke regulation that covers this large jurisdictional region. So in that sense, I'm pretty sure Europe will be a benchmark for other jurisdictions to learn from. We'll see if it's to follow or to pick the best bits and design better regulatory frameworks. But certainly we will be forming some kind of precedent for this large, big, bespoke regulatory framework for crypto assets.
Thank you, Agata. Thank you for these insights. And just to bring some advantages to this whole regulation topics, because most of the non-lawyers would say, do we need so much regulation? Is it really good for the market? Does it really help the market? I would just tell you, if you get a license under the new MiCA regime in one jurisdiction within a European Economic Area, you can passport your license or your permission or your white paper within the entire European Economic Area. So you do not need any longer a license in Germany or a license in Lithuania or a license in the Netherlands. You get just one license and you passport it to all European Economic Member states, countries. And this is also the benefit of a single market, not just single regulation, but just one regulation which applies to everyone and which gives you the access to 500, 600, 700 million people. So this is, I think, something very good from that perspective. But what you said, Agata, the EU is putting a benchmark for others to follow. Is this a benchmark where UK will follow? Is this something where UK maybe has left the EU and will follow the lead of at least the crypto assets regulation of how the MiCA is doing it? Or how is it going to be, or how is it right now, Blair? What can you tell about that?
Yeah, look, that's an interesting topic, and I think hypothetically the situation you outlined there sounds very good in principle. I guess the challenge will be for firms to actually receive that bit of regulation, especially in the kind of startup phase or innovation phase. Whereas I'm sure that level of regulation benefits much larger institutions such as banks and whatnot else that are already kind of approved in Germany, for example. But if we look at the UK in particular, there's two main what we call national competent authorities in the UK: the FCA, so the Financial Conduct Authority, and the Prudential Regulation Authority. So the Prudential Regulation Authority looks after prudential regulation in particular. So that leaves the FCA, which is kind of looking after conduct. And they're the particular regulator that does look after crypto in particular. Regulation in the UK for crypto is limited to the Fifth Money Laundering Directive, which requires crypto firms operating in the UK to seek license, or rather a registration from the FCA to conduct that activity within this jurisdiction. And that legislation is largely focused more on businesses rather than the technology. So it's about the conduct of the business and is most particularly focused on anti-money laundering technology and measures that are in place, although there are aspects of the approval process which certainly kind of go beyond just purely regulation and kind of drift more into some of the other kind of more traditional approvals that and licenses in the UK space. I guess that although that is the underlying crypto asset registration or legislation that applies to crypto firms, for example, at Gemini, we don't just offer crypto to crypto. We enable customers to buy, sell, and store crypto using fiat. So those customers can come on board and purchase crypto using their debit card or bank transfer. So with that in mind, other parts of legislation kicks in. And so while the idea that crypto firms would only be subject to one piece of legislation, in our instance, we also had the e-money area as well, which meant that we are also an e-money institution, and many firms within the UK space will have that kind of crossover into other spaces. And so you can obviously look at the e-money side as one particular bit of legislation that is applicable. Also, kind of there are other options out there in terms of multilateral trading facilities and other aspects as well. So, whilst the regulation in the UK is still under development, and it'll be interesting to see what 2022 kind of looks like from a further developing of the crypto kind of legislative landscape. There is already kind of certain kind of barriers and certain requirements that are already in place for crypto firms. So I think 2022 we will see either the more of a discussion or a development of something that is in the ballpark of MiCA. I think it would be remiss of the UK government not to kind of look at that and understand what works and what doesn't. I think I certainly think that our regulatory process is certainly going to develop, and certainly going to become continually more challenging for certain groups. I think if we look at the fifth directive and the way that process has gone here, as I said at the start, I think there's something like 15 firms that have got through that process, which started in earnest almost 2 years ago now. We know that around about 100 odd firms have either had the approval declined or have had to remove their application. And there are a whole bunch of other firms in the temporary regime, which means that they've neither been approved or denied as yet. But they could, you would imagine on the balance of probability that a lot of those firms are going to struggle to receive their approvals as well. So So I think we'll continue, we will see a development of the regulatory landscape here. I think it will continue to be more challenging for firms. And I think at the end of the day, you're going to be left with firms that have a real kind of a really high, strong culture of compliance, financial crime or anti-financial crime within their controls and their ethos. And I would certainly anticipate that Gemini would remain kind of top of the tree on that basis. So we'll see how it progresses.
Thank you, Blair. And let's also see how UK and the EU will interact in the future on the crypto assets industry. Maybe there will be something like a memorandum of understanding and something like accepting vice versa UK players and EU players on the crypto market. This would be, I think, something very positive for the global crypto market. So before I go to my last two questions regarding NFTs and DeFi, I would just like to have from you, Josh, the answer on do you think that the US lawmakers would take the EU regulation of crypto assets, the MiCA, as a benchmark? Do you think that this could be something where the US could take it just as it is and say, okay, we're gonna do the same now for the US, or is it out of the picture?
I think, okay, I can speak on behalf of regulators, on legislators, for example, because there are so many different views. If you look at just some of the comments made either in hearings or in speeches or in the public in general or tweets, however you want to look at it, you have some people who have very different views about digital assets from others. And some are very receptive to the idea of fostering a robust digital asset market, and some who are much more, I would say, cautious about that. I suppose, in my view, I would imagine that both legislators and regulators are aware of MiCA, for example, and are looking at it and have been, and may take it as persuasive guidance. But I think it would be unlikely that they would adopt it wholesale.
Yeah, fair enough, Josh. So thank you for that. So looking at the time, we have two questions which I would like from you to be answered. I would like to start with the NFTs, and we have roughly 8 minutes. So let's say we have two questions left. So each of you has 2 minutes per question, per answer. So looking only at NFTs, Josh, are NFTs regulated in the US? Are they not? What is the answer?
So yes, they're regulated, much as any digital asset would be. It depends on in which way. So just very quickly, as I had mentioned, for example, for the securities law analysis, you may say, well, wait, NFTs are collectibles. They're digital collectibles. How can these be securities? Well, it depends on how you're selling them, right? So if you're selling them and creating a reasonable expectation of profit for, this marketplace that you're going to develop, or this community, you may very well have sold a security. Similarly, as some of the NFTs have become more and more expensive, people have formed, for example, guilds, right, where you can purchase a slice or an interest in an entity that then would buy the NFT. That begins to look very much like a security, right? Especially if you're owning literally, a share of an entity buying the NFT as opposed to the NFT itself. So again, I know it's a dissatisfying answer, but from a securities law perspective in the US, it is case by case. You can't just say NFTs generally speaking. I think certainly to the extent that you are involving, money transmission and other sorts of things like that, other regulatory schemes may come into play. If you're selling them, you need to do, KYC AML, similar checks. If they're securities, obviously that regime comes into play. But okay, I think that's within my time limit.
No, thank you. Absolutely, Josh. But it's good that you explain that to the audience, because I heard a lot from my clients saying, okay, we're going to issue NFTs and we're going to sell them to the US investors because they're not regulated in the US. And I'm like, like stumbling and say, okay, are you sure about that? Because as how you say it, you have to look at each NFT on a case-by-case basis to look if they qualify as a security under the Howey test, which makes sense to me. This is also how the law in Germany or in the EU works. You cannot really say NFTs are NFTs because they're not defined. You cannot really say what is an NFT. You would need to look at what exactly is the token or the coin representing, what kind of claims and what is it giving to the buyer, to the investor. Yeah, and it's good that you say it here out loud, and that people need to really look down at their project and look how they qualify or how it qualifies under the respective market where they target or where they distribute their products. I would like to mix up the order of people, and I would like to go over to you, Agata, before I go to you, Nina, because I would like first to hear from you, Agata, how NFTs may be regulated by the coming MiCA regulation or by the existing MiFID regulation, and if this fungible test, or if the token is fungible, if this is something which needs to be looked at when answering the question if the NFT is regulated under MiFID or MiCA.
Thank you very much, Alireza. I quite like Josh's explanation about each instrument being individually analyzed, and not only instrument itself, but the arrangement around it. So how it is being actually sold and what arrangement it's being dressed with to be offered to others. Now, in terms of the NFTs in the context of MiCA regulation, this is actually an interesting story, because when MiCA was initially published, it was silent on NFTs. And then in the process of discussion and negotiation, now it's becoming more clear that this regulation should not apply to non-fungible or unique crypto assets. However, this now it's getting more interesting, because this sole attribution of a unique identifier to a crypto asset is not sufficient to classify it as a unique or not fungible. So again, you have to look into the instrument itself to understand its attributes and what it actually represents. So if it's a fractional NFT, it's more likely to be considered as security, in which case it would perhaps, I'm not saying it will definitely, but there is a possibility that it will become a security and it will be covered by MiFID regulation. But the assets that is unique and really non-fungible should not be covered by MiCA regulation, which leaves us in a little bit of a gray area again, because if the NFT is not covered, if we ascertain that an NFT is not covered by the financial regulation and is excluded from MiCA regulation, then again, it's becoming, there is a question as to how such instrument will in fact be regulated across the EU. And then we are back into the individual national regimes, because there is no harmonized regime that will be directed specifically at the NFTs. So it's a little bit of a puzzle. You just have to really be careful and do not fall into the obliviousness of thinking that if it's an NFT, then it's outside of MiCA and you are safe, because it might be that you are within the financial regulation regime or within an individual national regime of an individual member state, and then you have to look at this individual regime. So I don't think we are there yet on the NFTs to be able to say for sure in a clear way how are they regulated across the EU.
Thank you, Agata. But as I understand from you, the EU's perspective on regulation of NFTs is very close to the one of the US, to look at if the instrument is fungible and then to decide if it's maybe a MiFID financial instrument or MiCA financial instrument, and to look on a case-by-case approach, rather than to say NFTs are generally not covered by the legal framework. So if we would say we have an NFT which is not under MiCA regulated or not under MiFID regulated, could it be regulated under German law, Nina?
Yeah, thank you, Alireza. And I just would like to add that the current compromise proposal of the European Parliament really has an important exemption for the exemption of NFTs from MiCA, which is that NFTs should only be excluded if they are not traded on crypto exchanges. There you see the same theme again that I just mentioned from the German legal perspective, that everything that can be traded actually constitutes a financial instrument because it's for because it serves investment purposes. So it will be very interesting to see what route MiCA will ultimately actually take. And in addition to that, yes, the German definition of crypto asset does not refer to fungibility at all. So it will be very difficult to argue just due to the fact that something is non-fungible, that it's not encumbered by the crypto asset regulation in Germany. Yeah, so unfortunately, no good news for the NFT business out there, at least in Germany already by now. Typically, if it's a tradable instrument, then you will find yourself in that category. And plus, we have actually EU-wide a new thing implemented into our private law, which will come into force as of next year, and that is digital services and goods. At least if you're trading with a consumer, then you may find yourself being obliged to update your digital asset. And that will also be very interesting to see how that will work out in our token space.
Thank you, Nina. So to put it in a nutshell, if the NFT is not regulated already by EU regulation, by MiCA or MiFID, it could be still regulated under German law. And this is what the issuers of NFTs, but also those who trade with NFTs should be aware of. Is it going to be easier if you want to issue or trade your NFT in the UK, Blair? So how would that work?
Yeah, look, I can't say that this is the golden bullet and it's all roads lead to the UK. I think like has already been kind of outlined here, it's very much important to kind of understand how the particular token works and whether it is subject to any of the existing legislation. The UK legislation is, when it comes to this, is still, very, very similar, identical to that in the EU, as it starts to kind of diverge a little bit as the UK introduces its own bits of legislation, but there's not too much of a differentiation there. I think, what I would say is that firms that are involved in this space are also kind of caught in other parts of legislation as well. For example, if they're enabling that transition from fiat to Nifty, from that purchase perspective, they may also be part of, as described before, the e-money legislation as well, depending on where that fiat is sitting in that kind of purchase process. So, no, I think it'll be interesting to see over the next kind of 12 to 24 months. The NFT environment has certainly grown. It's grown in a lot of interest in the UK, and at Gemini in particular, we see a lot of interest in Nifty Gateway, which is our NFT marketplace. But no, I think I would echo the points that have already been made here, which is it does depend token by token.
Thank you, Blair. So I was also looking in parallel to the questions. I still had the question for you all about DeFi, but let's put it beside me. If we have later a little bit time left, we can jump back to DeFi. But I would like to look at the questions raised in the chat box. And I like the questions actually. So Gavin Smith is asking you, Nina, So you're probably aware of BCB, which just purchased Sutor Bank. Would you say, showing this case, the German market is pretty cool or pretty crypto friendly? What do you think, Nina, about the news that BCB, so for those of you who do not know BCB, BCB is a crypto player, and Sutor Bank is a very traditional German bank, which was active in crypto, to be fair enough. And now we have heard that BCB just acquired the very traditional Hamburg-based Sutor Bank. So, Nina.
Yeah, I mean, we really welcome regulated players to our German market. So if you are a regulated player, or if you are prepared to acquire one, then you will feel quite comfortable here, because I think, you know, we really created a kind of sufficient level of legal certainty in the meantime. But for startups and mere tech companies, you know, they would presumably not be really in favor of our regulatory regime. Yeah, BCB is an interesting case, because you always have to keep in mind that you cannot simply come into Germany and buy a bank. If you want to have 10% or more stakes in a bank, then you as owner will be checked as well by BaFin. So that is maybe the interesting thing in this acquisition, as it was announced, as obviously BCB must have passed the test then. And that's good news.
Thank you, Nina. We have two questions from Saga. Saga, I will take your first question to the panel because it's a legal question. The second question I will answer you straight away. It's about taxation. It is not absolutely true that taxation in Portugal is 0%. It depends on what kind of tax you look at. And it's also not true that it will stay at 0%. In Germany, for instance, you have no VAT on trading of cryptocurrencies such as Bitcoin. There's a nice overview of taxation within the European area of Actus, which is published on Actus page. You can check it out. It gives a nice overview of taxation, but I do not think that people will start now to move the jurisdiction only because of taxation, because you can change it quickly year by year. And I don't think that this is something which moves the talents from Germany to Portugal, even though, fair enough, some companies in Germany have moved to Portugal, but it's maybe because of the weather rather than because of the taxation. So looking at your first question, who wants to answer that one? How high is the probability that talent will flow to El Salvador because of regulation? Maybe Josh, is that something for you? Do you think that people or talent is moving to El Salvador because they are very Bitcoin and crypto friendly now?
I have no insight as to people's migration habits for El Salvador. I do think, you know, in general, to the extent that there become greater and greater differences among, you know, regimes and flexibility and permissiveness, you may have some folks moving to other jurisdictions. But I think, as some people have mentioned on the panel previously, I think to the extent that people are willing to buy into the regulation, so to speak, and to embrace the regulation and the idea that certain digital asset businesses will be regulated, I think once people can get over that mental hurdle, then I think that would stem a lot of that kind of migration. But I mean, your guess is as good as mine on that.
If I could just add to that as well, I think the idea that there's kind of like this small nucleus of staff that kind of move to kind of wherever crypto is most friendly is kind of, I think, is missing the point somewhat. I think what we're seeing is just, yeah, and we've seen that at Gemini, is just a growth of people interested in joining crypto firms and moving away from stuffy traditional finance firms and actually seeing the light and seeing the value that crypto can provide as a truly international, global, currency for the world. And I think a lot of people have woken up to that. And as an ex-banker, I couldn't have imagined when I started out that I'd be in this environment, but I am. And we've got an enormous number of of new roles live, and the kind of the interest from traditional financial staff is phenomenal. So I think what we'll see is less a talent flow to one place or another, and more of a kind of an awakening of staff in those jurisdictions to say, hey, I want to move away from a bank or traditional, more standardized fintech, and I want to be part of that crypto kind of ecosystem, be part of that future, because the opportunities are enormous. So I think that the talent flow is not to El Salvador necessarily; it's to crypto, and that is particularly exciting to see, and long may that continue.
Thank you, Blair. We have 2.5 minutes left. There are a couple of questions. Even though, Chris, I like your comment, it's not really a question. I agree with you. Over-regulation is not needed, but to have a risk-based approach and to protect the consumers, I think this should be a goal, no matter which jurisdiction you are, especially when you look at crypto. I mean, me personally, even though I'm a lawyer, I'm not a big supporter of over-regulation, but we all agree that in the crypto market, in the crypto space, there's lots of fraud and lots of stuff happening. Therefore, a risk-based approach, I believe, is good for all the markets. The question regarding investment banking, I would put aside. I like the question regarding Sparkasse in Germany, which is a big savings bank. So the big savings bank, a very traditional bank again, in Germany, declared today or officially announced that it will offer its over 50 million consumers investment in crypto assets. So Nina, what do you think about that? Is this a good move? Is this something which is going to waken up the conservative banking market in Germany?
Absolutely. I think that is a huge step forward. It's not only one single savings bank, but it's rather the savings banks community which is walking into that space. And for example, they contributed massively to the success of Apple Pay here in Germany. Yeah, they have a very broad custom basis. I would say every other household here in Germany has a savings banks account. So that's a big step. Yes, absolutely.
I would fully agree with you, Nina, and let's see where this is moving. But also other banks like Volksbanks, they also declared that they will route their customers to Börse Stuttgart and Bison and the Bison app, and to will probably help them to make their investments in crypto. So the last question which remains here for the last, let's say, 1 minute, I would like you to, Agata, to take that one. So if the EU law does not really, the common EU law, so MiFID and MiCA does not apply, how to determine which EU law applies? I think this is something which goes direction passive reverse solicitation versus active solicitation. So which jurisdiction law applies for the crypto players in the EU? So can you say something about that?
Well, it's a very difficult question to answer, because it really depends what kind of player you are and what you are seeking to do and from where. So I think it largely depends on whom do you offer your products to, and are you an issuer or a service provider? So you have to really determine your individual circumstances, but mostly those whatever regulatory frameworks there are in whichever jurisdiction, they usually apply to a particular person, which tends to be some kind of, if it's financial regulation, and some kind of intermediary, or if it's a crypto focused regulation, that can be an issuer. So you really have to start from that kind of to what role are you playing in that business, and what are you offering and to whom, because it is also very relevant. So for example, if you are offering anything on the US territory, regardless if you are based in the US or not, you may be caught within the US regulations. So it's not only EU regulation that you have to worry about, it's really much broader than that. And this industry is, this technology is disregarding borders. It's kind of above the jurisdictional borders because it's seamless and across the borders. So there are many cross-border international issues that you have to consider, even if you are based as a firm in an individual jurisdiction.
Thank you, Agata, and thank you all who have participated today in our panel. Looking at the time, I think it is the time to say goodbye and thank you, of course. And so I hope to see you all soon if Corona allows in person, but we most likely will see each other also virtually. And for those of you who could not get their questions being answered, you can reach out to any of us, I believe, through social media. And please enjoy the rest of the EBC. Thank you all.
Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Alireza. Thank you, Nina. Thank you, Blair. Thank you, Agata. Thank you, Josh. And yeah, I know we have a few questions left. You can reach out to the speakers also through the People tab and have a meeting with them there. Or if not, as Alireza said, on social media. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. See you in the next session. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.